Alright, good morning everyone. Welcome back to Chapter 11's presentation. We'll do the other half this morning. Again, just like we did last week, we'll probably break it into two, have a break, because we've still got about 60, 70 slides to get through today. So we'll do parts 3 and 4 of it today. So we'll start off with the system administration elements where we left off, and see what it has to say. So on this one, we look at the control panel for administration. Now again, what will be on this panel will display things a little differently depending on the version of Windows we want to look at. But one of the things that you need to be able to use is the administrative tools under the computer management. So this gives you system tools, storage, scheduler, device manager. Under the storage, you've got the disk management, so you can adjust partitions and things like that in here. Okay, so event viewer, so here you can control your events and have a look at log files. So you can have a look at the types of events that occur in the reporting logs. So depending on the level of the event, it could be classed as for information, it could be a warning, an error, critical. If you're getting critical warnings or events, you should look at those pretty smartly, because they indicate some form of crash or lockup. Audits, failures, so there's success and failure audits, and they include such things as every time you log in, failed attempts at login, that sort of thing. Local users and groups, this is where you can adjust, well, another area that you can use to adjust privilege for the users or the groups. Now, use of groups is quite useful because you can set the privileges for the group and then just add members to the group, and they inherit the privileges that you set for the group, rather than having to individually assign rights to every user. You can just go in and assign the user to a group, and they inherit those permissions. Performance monitor is very messy. It's a bit like the task manager, and you can have a look at what things are doing at the current time, how much CPU is being used, how many interrupts per second. So you can delve into what resources are being used and how they're stacking up. So if you're getting something that's consuming too many resources, you can look into it and find out if you need to adjust something. Data sources, component solvers. So component object model allows you to adjust the software components for your environment. So again, this is all just massaging your areas. Services console allows you to manage individual services that are available within the operating system. You can look at the current status, whether it's running, idle, whatever it is, how it starts up. So this one, you got manual, so you've got to actually come in and turn it on. Automatic will fire up whenever that service is called upon, and then turn itself off afterwards. The data source tool is basically all the different types of information that can be stored, what access they have, so you can control that information flow. Print management allows you to manage your printers. Okay. Basically, your Server Pro and Enterprise editions are where you're going to get this, because that's where you could set up printer queues and things like that, shared resources. Allows you to configure printers and then push that configuration out to multiple computers within group policies, things like that. Memory diagnostics, basically you run it and it checks your memory, and this requires your computer to restart and do some various tests, and it can take quite a few minutes to run. It's not a quick diagnostic tool. System information allows us to gather all sorts of information about the operating system, the hardware that's attached to the computer, what's the current configuration of the various hardware components and resources and software environments can all be accessed via this panel. You can export this information, so if you need to send it off to a third party to get extra assistance in diagnosing issues with a particular software clash or something like that, you can have a look at that. So you can get it via MS-info32 in the command prompt, or you can just type in sysinfo in the Windows search bar, and it'll come up as one of the options. System configuration will allow you to massage how the system starts. So generally speaking, you can do this through the GUI as well, but so you don't have to use the MS-config through the command prompt, but you can. But all of these, the startup, the services, can be massaged through the system configuration GUI as well as the command line. Registries, I would caution you to not play around to learn what your registries are on your host machine. I would definitely play with registries in a VM while you're learning what you can and can't do in there, because registries are very sensitive to change, and to totally get rid of an application or a virus or something like that, you may need to go in and remove line items out of local machines and user information and so forth, because some things inject themselves into the registry files and do not get removed even on uninstallation of the applications and so forth. So to totally get rid of them, you may need to go into the individual registry keys and delete them. But as I said, please look at it in a virtual machine before you go playing, or have some very clear instructions on how to get rid of the particular issue you're having. To edit the registry keys, you can use the inbuilt regedit function, and this allows you to go in and modify them. And these here are the registry keys themselves. So these are the actual master files, and then you've got subsections within each of these files that you can go in and get more specific information on and dive into it. It may be just as simple as going in and swapping a registry entry from a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to 0. So in other words, turn something on and off. Or you might need to go in and change paths, or just totally delete an entry. Management console allows for you to customize the GUI. So you can add utilities and tools and extensions and things like that in. And basically, there are third-party tools that give you better interfaces and more control over what's going on. One of the ones my son likes to use is called, I think it's Rainwater, to do all of that. He likes having his clock interfaces and that on his background screens, and adjusting his backgrounds and all that using different methods. So he's a budding programmer. He likes playing around. He spent 90 minutes last night getting his laptop to work again. He found out that you don't have 2 antiviruses on the same device. It's bad. So we do things and learn. Alright, so DXDiag is our DirectX diagnostic tool, and you can have a bit of a hunt around and find out what components and drivers are installed and tweak them if you so desire. Disk management utility is where you come in and change characteristics of your drives. Now, this is both your physical and logical drives. So down here we see 2 physical drives, disk 0 and disk 1, and within that you'll see all the partitions that are available, and some of these partitions will come up saying unrecognized or something like that, and basically what that means is it's being used by another operating system when you've got dual boot, things like that. And the thing here is, if these partitions are not full, you can actually adjust the partition sizes using this tool. It's worth having a play with, but just be aware that changing partition sizes is a very time-consuming thing to do, because it will have to go and rewrite any data sectors and things like that that need to be adjusted. So it can be very time-consuming to adjust partition sizes within here. The other thing you can do here is change your drive allocation. So you can, instead of having this as D drive, you can change the allocation to Z or X or whatever you want. So you can actually add and remove drives, add and remove partitions, and do quite a bit in there. I personally tend to use third-party applications to do my disk management. I found the disk management software in Linux boot systems to be a lot better than the inbuilt ones in Windows, especially if you're having to readjust our partition, and it just gives you more flexibility than the Windows one. So foreign dynamic disk has been removed from another computer or added non-initialized, so Microsoft doesn't recognize the drive. Healthy, offline, online, so you can have various states of the drives. Unreadable, in other words, you cannot read the Microsoft, cannot read the drive, which doesn't mean it's actually totally corrupt, just means Microsoft can't read it. Mounting drives, and this can be done through the Explorer, and it's very good if you've got ISO files, which I actually do. I've got lots of, like, if we, for example, do I have it copied back down? In our virtual, no, in our virtual machines, where did I haven't copied them back down, have I? No, there they are. So our ISO axes, okay, so if you wanted to, you could actually right click on that ISO and mount it, and that would then act as if it is a CD drive, basically. So mounting an ISO file is equivalent to putting it into your DVD player or something like that. So it actually allocates a drive letter, and you can access that ISO file as if it was on a disk in your disk player. Okay, so you can get applications as well as operating systems and that all in ISO files. So you can mount it and then access the installation procedure for that application via the ISO file. Quite often now you can get like Office and that in ISO file format. So adding arrays, so if you've got a RAID driver, you can add disks to your array, which is a basically multiple drives acting as one space, and you basically would do this on systems that have critical information, because you basically have two or more drives working together to create things like mirrored images or arrayed in such a way that you could have a disk fail and then rebuild the information on that disk via the other members of the array, because they've got the way the set parity options work is that you can rebuild drives if one fails. So you've got data recovery options, basically. Disk optimization is very useful. It basically reorders the most commonly accessed elements of the disk to the front. It gathers fragments of various files and puts them back in order, so it increases the efficiency of accessing the files within the hard drive. Now this, when I'm saying reorders, it doesn't actually mean that it's in sectors one after the other. It is basically so that the heads would move in the most logical order on the disk when it's reading. So there's that. You can also check your hard drive for errors. So we'll check the integrity of the actual media. Do not use these tools on a solid state drive, because you actually can cause harm to solid state drives using these tools, because basically you're looking at a set of memory chips in a solid state drive which have a finite number of read and write actions against them. And when you defragment a solid state drive, you are just consuming all of those read-write actions for no real benefit. It can actually cause your device to fail. With your error checking, it'll go through and give you a report. One of the options you can have is to just try to fix the errors as it discovers them, or it can just give you a report and then you can make a decision on how you're going to proceed with the errors reported. Okay, and you can have a look at the, so over here it'll give you, the serial number of the drive partition. It'll give you the total bytes of the space, how many hidden files, how many folders, how many files in total, your available space, and the status of everything there. I would normally, on my personal machines, I'd have it on auto recovery of sectors. If it can't recover a sector, it'll just mark it as bad, and what this does is it stops it writing any new data to this sector of drive, so it disables that drive error space so that it will not corrupt any further data being written down to the hard drive. So it basically disables the sectors and only leaves you with valid writing space on the drive moving forward. Okay, system requirements. You should always have an idea of what these are before you make any changes to your systems. Just because you've got the minimum requirements doesn't mean you should install your operating system on it. Basically, the big one is always going to be RAM. The more RAM you have, the higher the performance you're going to actually get, and that's across the board. CPU speeds, whether it's multi-core, single core. Okay, so you see here that the recommended settings are quite different, and you should always take that into account. We've covered a bit of that in the installation process. So various install methods attended, where you've got to be there to answer the prompts. Unattended will basically not prompt, it'll just have a script where it'll just run with no prompts. A automated installation is where we start it and we have a set of pre-configured settings, and it works off that script. Clean install means it installs all the previous version of the software has been totally removed and it is giving you a fresh install. And the last option there is to install over a network. Now, most of the network installs would be run via third-party applications these days. You can do it via Microsoft pushing out various items, but most enterprises I've worked with have ended up using third-party applications to manage remote installs, updates, and things like that, because they find that it is more reliable and they get more functionality out of these third-party software packages, so they can create images and things like that that they can push out, and it's more efficient. Okay, so I won't spend really any time here. At this day and age, we all know how to do software installations, and we can, the main one there is the MSI, so Microsoft Silent Installer, so you can actually look at that. Hi, bro. So you can, a lot of people may not know what the MSI actually stood for. So it just means it's basically silent install of the application, so it won't give you any prompts to answer during the install. So you basically have gone through and done pre-configuration of the install to create the MSI package. The compatibility mode that is available allows you to set the operating system parameters that this application would run under. So some applications will not run correctly on newer versions of the OS. So you would just set the program up to use a compatibility feature, which means it'll the APIs will behave as if it's running on a particular version of operating system to make it compatible. Okay. Uninstalling or changing features. It's always recommended that you uninstall applications that are no longer being used. This recovers resources and also removes potential security breaches, not breaches, vulnerabilities that are available via that application. So just be aware that you may just uninstall unused stuff. very many reasons why you want to install various applications across the enterprise. Now, you can also uninstall features within the operating system itself, not just in applications, but in the OS itself. Again, the reason for doing this will be to reduce your vulnerability of the system, so it's device hardening by turning off services that aren't used and removing features that are not required. You're hardening the operating system as far as cybersecurity goes. Security considerations is the last slide for this 1.3 section. And yeah, getting there. Probably a good point to call mid-break as well, because that'll be about the midway for today. So under security considerations, we look at how installed software can be accessed, what risks are applicable, so we can set the device to have some protections, what levels of default interaction can be accessed. So you basically set the allowable risk ratio through here. So apps and browser controls, for example, there you can set the level of malicious sites, set up whitelists and things like that. So under here you can actually apply policies for the hardening of the device, ensure that you have the anti-malware, antivirus, firewall rules. All this can be tweaked through this control panel. So one of the things you can do is make sure user access is controlled. You can also create a system that says only certain things can modify the system files, so that malicious software can't actually modify these settings. It has to be a specific user group. Okay. Windows Defender is inbuilt antivirus that is Microsoft. It requires continual updating. Now, would I say Windows Defender is a good antivirus, anti-malware platform? No, because Microsoft's not in the business of finding malicious software and generating fixes and things like that. That's where dedicated companies come into play, such as your Nortons, your Kaspersky, and so on, that are much better at that element. All right, so we have total 40 slides left. Just looking at time-wise, yeah, we'll take a break, I believe. How's everybody going? They want a 15-minute break? Then we'll come in and smash out the last section. Yeah, all right. I'll turn this off and we'll come back when we continue.